to hit that button and then you're turning the video on. And I don't know. I was watching YouTube before this, so.
Okay. All right. What's up, neighbor?
Yeah.
How are you?
Good.
Yo, so we know each other from Runway.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's like a whole like Runway crew. I listened to a couple of the episodes. They're really, really great.
I know when he said like, "Oh, my friend Noelle," and like all the stuff, she's married to my buddy, and he never mentioned who it was. And I saw your name on the thing. I was like, "Hold on, is that Brian's wife?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, she was right behind me, all in the Maybelline makeup room and stuff like that when I was shooting there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Just trying to like hide and deliver makeup bags and all of that fun stuff.
And you killed it. You did great.
Oh, thank you.
I love that.
It's a small world. We're all connected here.
I know. Everyone's connected. It's crazy.
Getting smaller every damn day.
I love that background. Is that all you did?
Yeah. No. So a couple, like, that's me. I have a couple of things on the wall, but Brian and I we're big collectors. So when we travel, we try and get something everywhere we go. And also a lot of it is like, this was just a random thrift find, which made me giggle, the baboon. So.
Yeah, this is Open Walkie. I'm Tony. This is my co-host Jeff over here.
What up? How you doing?
And we are with Noelle, Quanci, Giallorenzo, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say we actually, you pronounced it the Italian way, but we say Quanci, just because it's a technically made up last name. That my grandfather sort of picked up in the Air Force. So you don't have to give it that hard chi.
Quanci. It rolls off the tongue a little bit better.
Yeah. Anytime I tell someone, I'm just like, yeah, like my married name is Giallorenzo. They're like, Italian. Got it. Yes.
And you are a stylist and local 764 costumer?
I am.
All right. So how's that to costume some people?
How is that? So I will give like a little, I guess, added context just because for reasons, because costumer is technically a role that is under the wardrobe union. So it's a little bit of like a misnomer in that we are technically like a different department from costumes, but we are, working in tandem. So it's one of those things where like and also we are a regional union 764. So there's also like some differences in the way that like LA people consider themselves costumes, whereas like here we're very specifically wardrobe. And so we're kind of mostly like the on-set sort of costume support team. And so we're the ones maintaining continuity, doing distressing on stuff in many cases. Tailors are often, our 764 positions. So it's like alterations. It's sort of almost more like a technical position than it is. I mean, it's creative in many, many ways, but sort of the intention of the split is that one group is securing the clothing and making the creative choices. And then our job is sort of to maintain the integrity of the costumes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I want to get into way more of that after this, but your answers with what you wanted to do when you were a kid was like fascinating to me. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I said paleontologist and jockey.
You did. I said,
yeah, which funnily enough, like probably like could have thrown astronaut in there. Like as a kid, they definitely had, like a Spirit Week sort of option. And I'm pretty sure for Spirit Week, they had like a dress like the thing you want to be when you grow up. And I was like, well, is it possible to be like a jockey in space? I feel like I grew up around horses a lot. I spent a lot of my childhood in England, and there's like definitely more of sort of like a horse culture. And so I rode a lot while I was there, and that was sort of like I got the bug before I got there, but I think while I was there, it sort of was like the thing that I would do. And it's also where I like gained, I think, a lot of my confidence. And it is like a big part of sort of who I am and have grown up to be. That said, I am 5'7". There is probably no chance that I will be a jockey anytime soon. But I also am just like kind of a dinosaur freak. Like, it's sort of funny. I was born in New Jersey, and I grew up in a town that is weirdly famous for dinosaur things. And so I just sort of like was always really into those. And I think I sort of have a personality, and this I think lends itself to costumes, where like if there's a topic that I love, I'll kind of get a little obsessed about it. And then I'll just sort of like deep dive and just sort of like get completely wrapped up in it, which is great when you're researching something.
Yeah.
But also like people don't want to talk about dinosaurs like every day.
Were you a big fan of Friends? Because, the paleontologist with Ross, obviously. I'm a big Friends.
Yeah, I like didn't
I wasn't going to make that reference because I didn't want to accuse you of that, but
I'm a fan of Friends. I love that
but
show.
he's like kind of terrible. Like I feel like when I first watched it, I was like, oh, like Ross is the coolest. And like I think I've done a rewatch and I'm like, oh, he's kind of annoying.
Aren't they all annoying?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe when you're a paleontologist, like it's your personality is just walking around and being like, hey, I'm a doctor. Technically.
How old were you when you wanted to be a paleontologist? Because I think I just learned that word like 3 years ago.
I was probably dressing up as like a paleontologist for like career day through like elementary school. So pretty young, like pretty
what
young.
does one wear when dressing up? Like
I think at the time my point of reference was Jurassic Park. So it's just kind of like, oh, like cargo pants and like a matching like cargo vest, right?
So is that where you got this from? This is all a Jurassic Park reference?
No, it definitely is not. So my hometown, and shout out to Haddonfield, New Jersey. It's super cute and it's a pretty chill hop from the city. It's actually like the place that the first like most complete dinosaur skeleton was found in North America. So it has a giant statue of a dinosaur in the downtown, and we also had like a 50th anniversary, and like they basically have like entire celebrations around dinosaurs. Wow. And so I think just growing up, like it was just like there.
I don't think my city like celebrated anything. Oh.
They usually do. You just don't realize it until like once you find out what it is, it's like I don't know. It's all I can think about sometimes, where I'm just like, oh yeah, like that's
kind of significant though. I didn't know that either.
I mean, and it's a really tiny town, so it's sort of like, I don't know, it's a fun thing to sort of cling to. And it's all of these kind of like quirks of growing up in this really small town that has like kind of a lot going for it, that like once you leave, you're just like, oh, everywhere isn't like this.
So once you left that, like, how'd you end up in England?
So my dad worked in oil and gas. And so he was doing sort of like a work I don't know if it was like an exchange or just he was being stationed in the UK. But so he did like a partnership with British Petroleum, and we went out there for about 6 years. It was 2 different times for 3 years each. Actually, both of my brothers are born over in the UK, which I'm like a little jealous about. It's fine.
They have dual citizenship.
They don't, because so both my parents are Americans. The UK doesn't do the same thing that we do here. There's more nuance to it. It's telling me I'm raising my hand. But so they have like a more interesting story where like I'm just like, I was born in New Jersey.
Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't actually know that about you. How did we?
That's awesome.
You never mentioned that.
Ooh, I'm an endless well of mystery.
That was what, 6 years you were there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first time I was really little. I do still have some friends from that first time that we were there, because we were in Essex, which is sort of like the Jersey Shore of England. Or at least that's sort of how it has been characterized to me after the fact. And the second time I was in elementary school. So that was like, it's pretty, it's like a pretty formative time. Yeah.
Let's hear your best British accent right now. Go.
I can't. I literally can't. And the funny thing is like, I went to a British, like a little Anglican elementary school, and every year they would do a panto, and it's probably a panto. So it's like a Christmas play. It's this very traditional British thing. And all the kids get together and everyone got a role. And every single year I was always cast as like the American. So like, one year I was a surfer, and like one year I was a cowboy. And then like one year they had sort of like an international like stars, and I got to be like Hollywood star. So it was just like, and at the time I had mostly had sort of like a little bit of a British accent. So it's like an American kid who has a British accent who's trying to do an American accent. And so like, just about every year around Christmas, we'll watch it, and it is excruciating.
Well, so no one likes to watch their own.
I'll spare you. Well, it's funny, but it's definitely one of those things where you're like, I really thought that I had such a good accent. I thought I was so great.
That's
it's good. At least you had the confidence back then, and you look back and you're like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. Well, yeah.
Maybe I won't entertain people to do accents.
It's not good. When did the stylist and costumer thing come into play? How old are you when you thought about that?
Yeah, so I sort of started down. I've always been like a clothes person. I always sort of had like a compulsion to dress up. I think I didn't really I didn't come to like TV and film till a little bit later, but I did want to go to fashion school. Ultimately in high school, I made a choice. I went to FIT for 4 years. I got to do my last year in Italy, which was incredible. And after graduating, I worked in the industry in fashion for a couple of years. And actually in that time, I ended up meeting my now husband, Brian, who at the time was a production assistant and like he's like, I was a grip. And I'm like, I think you might have just been a production assistant.
Wow.
Sure. But so he was working in the biz, and I was starting to meet all of these incredible people who were also doing the freelance thing. And something about it just really sort of like clicked with me and my brain. And at the time I was also sort of like in that weird, like, post college, you've worked a couple years, you're feeling a little disenfranchised with like the corporate everything. And I ended up really like kind of taking a leap and sort of putting myself out there and taking a lot of people out for coffee. And just saying like, hey, if you need a production assistant, like on weekends, which like no one ever did, but it did ultimately, like meeting all these people allowed me to feel confident enough to just quit my full-time job kind of without anything lined up. And then, yeah, which I mean, honestly,
that's kind of ballsy. I don't know too many.
You know what? It's the kind of thing that you can do when you're on your parents' health insurance. Like,
okay, so you were.
I was 25, so it was like almost 6 years ago. So it's been a minute, but it definitely was like, I think that some of it was because I remember like coming out of a meeting with my supervisor at my job in fashion, which like in some ways I feel like I could have been doing that job for the rest of my life because it really was something that like was very stable and regular and the people were very nice, but it just was one of those things where I kind of felt like I wanted to try more. Which, you know, I think that as your life goes on, you can definitely like argue that that's really amazing. And I will say like now that I'm older, I'm kind of like, oh, wow, like that was a really wonderful setup for a different time or like a different person at a different time. But sorry, I feel like I got off track, but that's to say.
No, you're.
Yeah, I'm into it.
You're on track.
Thanks.
So wait, so you're 25 or 26 in this timeline.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
So then I day played a little bit as a production assistant. I actually threw up on my like very first day.
What was the show? What was the?
So my very first day of work was on The Affair, season 2, I want to say. And it was at Astoria Kaufman Studios, which I live very close to now. But at the time, I was living in Brooklyn. And I was like, I'm going to stay with my boyfriend. It'll be great. We'll have an awesome time. And I think I was booked for like 3 days. The first day, I am given a car and I'm given a card, which like for production assistants in costumes, it's like you can do it. There's a couple of different sort of like tasks that you'll be doing, but where they really need bodies is like returns. So it's like you're really just like carrying bags and bags of stuff and taking them to a store and returning whatever like isn't being used. And so I was given a card and it was like a Chrysler Town and Country, which is like a very classic, like costume PA car, actually just a production car. Yeah, and I put this credit card on the center console and there was like this door and the card slipped in between the door and like the actual body of the car. So I lost the assistant designer's P card inside the body of this car and was promptly had a tiny panic attack and felt awful. They had to like call in like a mechanic to come and like take the car apart because that somehow was faster than just getting a new card. And so just like the stress and the feeling bad of that day was so insane. Oh, so I guess I threw up the second day. Sorry. I ended up going.
You made it through day one.
So I made it through day one. I have this amazing dinner with Brian because he's celebrating my first day as a big girl production assistant. And I think just something did not agree with my stomach. I spent the entire second day barfing. And eventually to a point where I said, I have to I was in the studio for a little bit. Then they put me in the car. I was in the car with a bunch of PAs who I'm actually friends with and have worked with since, who were like, you should just go home. Cause we can't keep pulling over. So
the first 2 days did not.
So the first 2 days were not great, but I since then, basically
Since then, you've never puked on set.
Since then, I've never puked on set. But I was really lucky that at that stage, a good friend, Sarah Nolan, was actually working in the writer's room at the Americans. And she gave me, or she was the showrunner's assistant. And she gave me a recommendation to the designer, Katie Irish, and Nikki Stiles, the assistant. And they were looking for a full-time production assistant. And they knew that I didn't really have very much experience in the industry per se. But I had a great interview with them and I was brought on as a full-time PA. And so I did that for the full season of, I think it was the 5th season. But it was a really amazing experience. And I'm still really close with the PAs who I worked with on that. And they're supervising now and I work with them. And it was a really awesome way to sort of start my everything.
I love to see that when PAs that you start out with and they start growing more and moving up, and I think for everybody that's a good thing to hear about and see. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. What's so aside from boffing all over the place and doing all that stuff, it's what are some proud accomplishments you've had, moving on after the PA?
I mean, that is an accomplishment in itself.
What have we accomplished since and they did not call me back, believe it or not. They never asked me to work another day.
I personally would not ask you to work another day.
It's okay,
and by that. Yeah.
Cleared your path to go on to what you're doing now. So
you know what? They did me a favor.
They did you a favor. They were like, this girl's not supposed to be PAing for us.
Absolutely. They said she should go somewhere else.
Seems like it worked out.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is some of it is just whenever because inevitably you're not going to know things, and sometimes unfortunately I feel like I'm destined to always sort of learn the wrong way to do something first, and so it's oh great, I will not do that again, and that's great, it was worthwhile. So as far as you asked about things I'm proud of, I think I'd say the biggest two things I'm proud of is sort of just maintaining the relationships that I've made through my styling, while also doing some of this union work. It definitely is not always easy, timing wise, because inevitably, if I'm on something full time where I'm doing 764 work, I'm not necessarily able to be on set all the time for some of the non-union jobs that I'm doing, which I work quite often with Food Network specifically, and with some of their talent, which Sunny Anderson is one of my clients and coworkers, and she's just absolutely incredible, and really just understanding of the schedules and conflicts and the flex, and gives me a lot of that flexibility, which is just really special. And so I think just being able to do both of those things and not necessarily having to feel like I have to pick is something I'm pretty proud of, because I think it's And I say that sort of to say that, like, I think you can do a lot of different things that aren't necessarily like one specific thing. I remember starting out, people are like, you have to specialize or you have to pick one thing. And I personally have not found that to like have to be the case, if that makes sense.
I agree. I mean, everyone has a different path and everyone has a different way of doing things. So,
Yeah.
some people's advice might not work for you and other people's like resonates perfectly. And
Yeah.
you just take what you can from everything and move forward, whatever.
Exactly.
I think, well, I know you a little bit. Obviously, I didn't know every detail you just told, but I think that you actually have a pretty lucky story in terms of you're like, I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do this, and it's just worked out. And
yeah.
And I think when I met you, you weren't in the union, or I know you weren't.
No, yeah.
You just kind of met the right people, obviously worked hard and put the time in. But sometimes that takes a decade for someone to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really lucky that I've had such great advocates in my work where like I have never felt like making a choice like, oh, I'm going to do 764 because I do need a little bit more like stability financially, emotionally, life wise. I never felt like I was losing the ability to do creative projects. And I think that especially like the people who I end up working with on a lot of my 764 projects, particularly my supervisor who I'm currently working with, they know that I have a million pots on the stove at all times. And that I'm going to make it work and I'm going to like do the job that I've been hired to do. And then also like, oh, hey, like I have to go do a return at lunch, like see you in a little bit. So yeah. And I think some of it too is like, I'm excited for what the future holds because I think like none of the jobs I've actually had professionally, I knew were jobs until I really did them. And so it's sort of one of those things where I think my career kind of has gone, oh, like that's a job? Cool. How do I figure out how to do that? Who do I follow? Like, who do I talk to? And I've been lucky to find people who have been willing to answer and, take me along for the ride, for lack of better verbiage, maybe.
No, that's
that's great. You have go ahead, Tony.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, and it's probably attributed to your character, but like you have a good community of people. Yeah, I'm giving you a compliment. Calm down. No, that's one of the hardest things about freelancing is getting your team together, Tony. Getting like, the people you want to work with together, because obviously, that's everyone's goal. We all want to do creative stuff. We all want to make money, but we also just want to work with the people we want to work with, to be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think we just work we all know, like you do so many hours on these projects. It's like, you just kind of want like good vibes.
Good vibes. You want to be around the people, what they can do. And
right.
It's just such an ease of mind, when you can do that.
Absolutely.
I always like to read call sheets, like when I get them and I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad these people, because it's like, you've worked with them so many times and that's like a big thing about seeing a call sheet every once in a while. And you're like, oh, wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like with the added layer of like having Brian, it's just like, oh, hey, you're on a job. Like, who's on the camera team? Like, maybe I know them. And that's kind of like a fun thing too, where I feel like every once in a while, I'm just like, oh, do you know any of these camera people? Like, do you think they'll let me like look at their monitor?
Well, that's why that's why I think this thing is a big thing that we want to keep going with, because it's like it allows us to get to know more people from other departments than just from ourselves. Like we
Mm.
worked together for a couple seasons on Runway, and we've probably said a few sentences together because we
Yeah,
never really interacted that much other than for a short time frame. And it's like,
absolutely.
yeah, so it's like it's good to like get to know the people you're on set with because you tend to just stick with your same department because of all the time constraints,
Right. Yeah, there isn't always time for hanging
Always
out.
time to, yeah, hang out and
There's
do
some time for hanging out, but not a ton.
yeah. Uh, yeah. What's a day to day kind of like? What's your typical, or what's the one that you like to like your favorite
Yeah.
day to day styling?
So, well, and that's the fun. I think that's the part that I like about it is that every day is really different. Um, if I'm styling someone, it's I like to break up my weeks into sort of like day chunks of like this day is a shopping day, this day is an admin day. When you're styling, you're really kind of like doing like everything. You're doing budgets, you're having to talk to line producers to get more money, you're shipping, you're chasing people down for receipts. So in some ways, like those kind of I'm doing less of those now, but they're kind of structured in an unstructured structured way. Um, as a 764 costumer, obviously, like we have a similar sort of cadence to a lot of other union folks. When you're on actual set, I'm currently in prep right now on a movie. I will actually be going to Boston for 2 weeks. It's going to be kind of fun. I will take recommendations, but like prep for us is a little bit like kind of the calm before the storm. Because we have to get clothes together. We are getting basically like the shop up and running. You're kind of working more like 8-10 hour days, kind of like wandering into the office, organizing stuff, getting your kit ready, knowing that in a couple waiting for a script, a breakdown, how many background you need, how much like manpower, all that kind of like this is all of the admin. Because so many of our like background things can often be like so up in the air. And sort of like I'm the key costumer on this job, so I'm sort of like the support for the supervisor, just sort of like a second set of eyes and ears to make sure that everything is up and running and ready. Because ultimately, we have to basically like load like a 50+ foot truck with everything that we're going to need for like our 2 weeks in Boston and then also like the many weeks in New York after that. So it's sort of that keeping up with like what is going to be coming down the pipeline when you're actually like on the truck and doing things. I'm mostly sort of logging costumes, which we have this amazing software called Sync on Set. And it basically allows us to sort of log every single piece of clothing that every character is wearing. And that helps us maintain continuity. The set costumers will put pictures of like what they're actually wearing on set. I'll take pictures on the truck. It's sort of this like from all sides, we're trying to make sure that we've covered exactly what's been worn on camera so that if God forbid we have to do reshoots, we know exactly what we need to pull. Yeah. It's a lot of laundry. It's a lot of running stuff. It's a lot of setting actors' rooms. That's kind of the thing. It's, grabbing crafty and making sure you have like 3 beverages at your desk. Make sure you're nice and hydrated. So I guess in that sense, like there is a cadence. but also like every day is different. And inevitably, like, it's one of those things too, where like, if all of a sudden they decide to change the order or, you know, pull something up or push something back, it's kind of just rolling with those punches. Because depending on the project, like, you know, sometimes it'll be chill and you'll be like, oh, I'm just doing laundry on the truck for 8 hours. But sometimes it's a lot more scary than that.
What's your biggest oh shit moment? Like where it's like everything seems to be chill and then all of a sudden it's not and you have to like scramble, because I think every department has had that type of moment.
You know what? I know what my oh shit moment is. So I was working on Aquafina is Nora from Queens, their last and final season, season 3, with Liz Samuels was the supervisor, and Michelle Lee is the designer. And there was, I won't give any spoilers, but there's a character who has like colored stockings, and the director, I think, like decided that they wanted striped stockings, but we had like solid brown stockings and like solid yellow stockings, and we were like, okay, well, you can kind of only have like one. Because we were also in like Flushing, not particularly close to anything, and it was sort of a situation where it's like you just don't ever want to be holding camera. So what ended up happening is we cut the yellow stockings into like these little, we called them calamari because they just kind of ended up being these weird little tubes. And we kind of like used the tubes to put them over the solid stocking so that it looked like it was striped, even though it wasn't. It was like kind of a nightmare on set because you're like trying to make sure it's flat up against it and it naturally wanted to roll, but it actually looked really good. It was one of those things where you're like, oh my God, this is like going to be a complete disaster. And then it was like, oh wait, are we like really good at our jobs? Did we just like MacGyver our way out of this crisis? Like, this is awesome.
That's interesting because from a camera perspective, I might hear the director just be like those stockings don't work. And you don't know what's going on in the other department at all. So I like hearing stories.
We're usually we're just sort of like on the truck being like what? They're just stockings. Like, it's fine. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know, our job as wardrobe. And I think that that's some of what I'm enjoying about the 764 work is that ultimately, at the end of the day, you're there to service the vision of the designer and the director. And so it's like, if you can do it within like the time and the budget allowed, then like we'll do it. You know, I think when it gets difficult, sometimes it's like when you're being asked for something that just is not able to be done. And I mean, that can be like really disheartening and, you know, it happens, but so far I haven't had too many of those. Like, I don't think I've had like a truly like, oh shit moment yet.
Who are you talking to? Like one of the ADs?
Like when something goes bad.
No, like when the director's like I need gold everywhere. Like, you know, who's telling you that?
I mean, honestly, usually if they get to set and we have to change something on set, then like there's been a communication breakdown that is maybe greater than something we can like always fix. It does also, I mean, usually it would also depend on the rapport you have. Like, I know costumers who have great rapport with directors on set. I don't do as much set costuming. I'm usually on the truck, so I'm sort of mostly doing like admin and support. But you know, it's just kind of depends on like who you have the best relationship with and who will be honest about like what they actually want. Because I think also some of it too is like a lot of the job is figuring out like, is this a must or is this like a, I'd like it, but you know, and I'm just telling you like stream of consciousness, like what, if we had more time, I would have liked. Cause I think sometimes it's like, you want to fix a thing, but you maybe can't. And so it's just, you know, kind of determining like when is the moment to kill yourself.
Have you ever brought home anything to Brian, like knowing that he's in the camera department and everything and being like, hey, like this is kind of on the fence. Like, do you think this will work on camera? Is it going to marais? Is it going to like do some weird shit? Like, have you ever done that? Like,
yeah, well, actually, I think like I've gotten pretty, I think doing the styling stuff, I've gotten like pretty good at like my moire, sort of like crazy, like, oh, this color is going to look nuts. Or this pattern will look weird. But I don't know, I will oftentimes bring like, if there's like a non-returnable like plaid shirt, I'll be like, Merry Christmas, Brian. Here's a plaid shirt. I know you love them.
I've gotten free clothes from wardrobe people on set too.
We're very
like,
we're a generous bunch.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I think like I think Brian and I are like, I sort of sometimes don't understand, I think, his job entirely. And I think he probably knows what I do a little bit better than I know what he does. Just in the sense that I'm just like, oh, that person who I've seen, like, I haven't seen him do his job, which
doing his job, and you know,
it's
a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. So it's different, but not saying that anything, not taken away from your job at all, because there's you know, people do things and people are great at certain things. So you're not supposed to be good at his job and he's not supposed to be good at yours. So it's like, I
think I would be a great second AC, right, Brian?
Is he sitting right there?
Oh, he just walked in. He's laughing at me now. It's fine.
I think
we're gonna get Brian on here at one point anyway.
Yeah. We'll get him on later on. I think you're not supposed to know what he's doing if he's not well.
If I know, then something has gone horribly wrong.
You talked about being a fan of Runway and then getting to work on it. How was that?
That was definitely like a pinch. I mean, to circle back to like the proud things, like that was definitely a pinch me moment. That, funnily enough, I think I got an email from Mary, who is just an incredible person, all around. And she said that she was recommended me through one of the contestant, like a previous contestant, who was following me on Instagram, which is just sort of wild. And some days I am very down on social media, but other days I'm just like, what an incredible tool for connection. And she's just like, oh, you know, we're looking for someone to style the accessory walls, and there's some sort of like brand stuff involved here, and you know, like, I'm CCing Rich, figure it out. And obviously nicer and a little more professional than that, but I just, as soon as I got the email, I was really just like, wow, I'm gonna like do everything I can to make sure that this happens, because I remember being like a kid and watching the show and just being like, wow, this is incredible. And that's what I want to do. And I think that was, that really set me on the path of clothes, or at least not really even like set me on the path of clothes, but sort of was an acknowledgement that like, oh, there are people out here in the world who are doing this as a job. And I think also like some of the earlier seasons are like people who aren't necessarily like professional. Like there's a nice mix of like non-professional fashion people and like professional fashion people. And it just made it feel like very kind of accessible to someone who was not in it. And it also, of course, made it feel incredibly glamorous, I think. And, to be able
you're
to.
so much less jaded than us. I like this.
Yeah, I know, right?
I don't know. It's well, and that's the thing. I mean, I definitely, yeah. I mean, I think you asked a question about just like what's the thing.
Camera guys.
Yeah, so I don't mean to like jump the gun, but I mean you asked the question of like what am I sort of like the most afraid of, and it's like I am kind of afraid of becoming a little like too jaded, or like angry or like disappointed, like caustic, about sort of like some of the less fun magical parts of the industry. But
it all happens, we all get like that,
yeah.
and then just jump back into it. It's
yeah, and I think that some of it too is like taking space and time and allowing ourselves to like enjoy other things. Because I do have to remind myself not infrequently that like I am not my job. I think that is really tricky, especially in a business that sometimes it feels like if you're not working and you're not being productive, then you're not really going anywhere. And it's like I continually try to like remind myself that like this is just like what a weird, wild trip this career is.
Keep reminding yourself that, because that happens to me every winter.
Yeah, I mean, well, now.
Even this week, I was
gonna say now's the time. I feel like where
I've been doing this almost 20 years, and I'm just this week. Yeah. I'm like, what's happening right now? What's going on?
Wow, I think
what are the stuff that you do to keep your mind busy, like in the off times, and like stuff that like keeps you going? Like, what's that stuff like?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, is that a question?
I mean, it's like it's a rhetorical type of, but whatever you want to answer.
No, answer it.
Yeah. Everyone has their own thing, but.
Yeah, what's your guys' thing? Am I allowed to ask questions? I feel like I'm running my mouth, but I guess that's the point.
No one wants to hear what I do.
Nobody wants to hear anything about us.
Yeah. What? No.
Maybe someday, but
okay.
Not today.
Not today. I guess like the stuff that I am doing for my own sort of peace of mind, I've been pretty into yoga lately. Which has been really great just for, body happiness. And it's just, this job is hard on your body, just no matter what you're doing. I know that especially with like the cameras and the rigs that you guys work with, like just we're just schlepping bags and, pushing like hundreds of pounds of clothes on racks and stuff. And so it's just kind of finding like physical sort of like meditative action has been sort of a goal of mine in the last couple of years. It's hard to build habits, and that I think I've been finding to be like the most mentally like difficult to sort of figure out. But I'm feeling good this year. So we'll see. And I'm also, I art making and just kind of like doing, painting and sketching when I can, always having a good book just in case it's like a, chill, relaxed day where I'm waiting for laundry to get done. It's like that kind of stuff. Right now it's the little things, but someday I'd like a vacation, but I don't know. We've had a lot of weddings the last couple years.
If the vacation comes, where you want to go as the destination?
Ooh, good question. I mean, we really would like to go to Japan. That's like really high on the list right now.
Tokyo?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I kind of am like, I'm vibing with the idea of going to like the mountains and doing like some skiing. I'd love to go to like Kyoto. My dad did a little bit of business out there for a while, never made it out. And I just feel like all the places he went to that had like really cool, like old traditional architecture seems like really neat. So I'd love to see that kind of stuff, but someday. we have a couple more trips than already planned this year, so I think next year we're gonna get to start,
Yeah, I mean, it's
planning
tough
like
being with a partner in the same business, because Brian's schedule is probably just as crazy as yours, and
yeah,
as we all know, so it's like to get the same time off is always kind of a shit show.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's hard, but and you know what? I was actually, as I was sitting on the train from work, being like, what kind of smart thing am I going to say on this podcast that will hopefully be helpful for, I don't know, some tiny Noelle or tiny other person to sort of like internalize. I think like Brian and I joke all the time, and I'm sure you guys do it as well. That like as soon as we book a vacation, we're just like, and so that's a pretty sure sign that I'm gonna get work, because that's when it happens. Or like any, like it's just
plan something too far ahead, and you're like,
any appointment
job I want to work on, and it's and then you just
it's an inevitability that it will happen, but it is like uncanny how often like this amazing like trip or this immovable life thing. I think like we both feel that when we were younger, not that we're that old.
We're so young, don't we?
So young. But just like when we were PAing, I remember the feeling of missing stuff. I remember the feeling of being like disappointed that I couldn't be at like a bachelorette party for a friend or a family dinner or, like a birthday, like someone's birthday, like that kind of stuff. And I think in some ways, I'm really grateful that I do not personally have anything that I was like, oh, this is something that I will regret later. And now that I'm older and I have like a little bit more perspective, it's like, if there was something, I would really hope that I would just do it and take the time away from work. And now that we're a little further along in our careers, we do have the flexibility of kind of saying like, okay, we're signing on for like month-long things. We have this, like we had a wedding in England last year and Brian was working on Measle, and it was a week that he was going to be gone. But, if you have it like on the calendar and you're honest enough and you're upfront about it, we've been really lucky that we've had people who are like, that's totally fine. Like, we'll figure it out. We'll work around you. And I mean, I think some of it too is like, I do think the industry is a little kinder after the pandemic. I mean, I think a lot of people like
just wait.
I mean, the thing is, maybe some of it too is like my department, particularly like being a department of mostly women, we frankly have like a little bit of sort of there's a different expectation of like a lot of people want to like go and have kids or, or just like can't stay, can't work 5 days a week. And so I think that with the pandemic, with a lot of especially moms having to stay home to like then transition back into the workforce, it's like, well, how do you make it like kind and fair? And so I've been really lucky, like on a couple of jobs I've worked on that have been like job shares, where people do like 2 days and then 3 days. And I just think it's like such a great way of working. And I think more people are like craving that because I don't know, like that was a rough 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, still don't, it's like not over, but I think that like
that's great that you can do that though. And you have a support structure in your department because I feel like it's not like that in the camera department. It's a little more competitive. You're not going to be able to generally take time off unless you're in a really constructive situation.
Yeah. I mean, it always depends on the show or the people involved and all that stuff. So it's kind of a hit or miss, like, what you're involved in at the time or what you're getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also like, shouldn't we all aspire to do that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, we should.
I don't know.
Great.
That's kind of like, I guess I've just sort of resolved to like not work with assholes anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
I would love that
for a lot of people that aren't assholes, like, if you're not an asshole, you're like, yeah, I don't want to work with those people. Yeah, sometimes those people get it and they change their tune, But yeah, talking about not being an asshole, volunteering with, fostering cats.
We just got our 8th foster cat rehomed.
That's awesome.
We're officially catless right now, which is kind of weird feeling. But I did promise Brian that we would take a little bit of time off because it is a little bit like kooky to, once I start getting into filming, it's like it basically becomes Brian's job to take care of the cat. So I was like, you know what? We also have a big trip to Hawaii coming up later this year. So it was like, you know what? We'll take a little break. So we're taking a little break right now, but like, it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. And I mean, if anyone's listening, adopt a cat. They're the best.
I got 2 rescues that I found in the streets of Brooklyn. So one's probably about 5.5. She's deaf. And then the other one is like still like looks like a kitten. She's the cutest thing, and she's like 3.5.
Oh my God, that's so fun.
The best.
Wait, what are their names?
Pepper and Maisie.
Pepper and Maisie. Oh, that's so sweet.
The funny thing is we got Maisie first, and she took to Pepper right away. Pepper was a kitten, and it's very rare that cats just get along. And
it's like, you're my friend.
Away, and it was nuts. But yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It's still involved with the Astoria Mutual Fund or Aid.
Oh, Astoria Mutual Aid. So and this is not something just exclusive to Astoria, but during the pandemic, a lot of sort of the inequities in our society and specifically our city became really obvious to people. And so they set up these offices or these organizations called mutual aid offices or organizations. And Astoria has a really great one that does like a food drive. They collect hangers, they collect new clothes, basically like anything that's sort of like extra that you don't need, they will take. And so when I was working on Project Runway, I noticed that from the year prior, all of like the extra like hair care stuff was basically just like thrown in boxes and stored for a year. And it just felt to me that like if you were paying for storage for something, that like ultimately you can't even really use because it's technically like not, I think it was something with like the packaging wasn't up to date or something like that. It just felt kind of silly to like hold on to. And I hate the waste that I see so often, specifically in our jobs, but also I think like,
in production, there's so much waste.
Yeah.
In general.
And that's why like, yeah. So it's like, it's micro and macro that I'm just like, I come from my mother is like a trash picker. I am a trash picker. I like grew up shopping at Goodwill. It was, like everything gets used and like until it's literally falling apart. And then you patch it or you sew it. But so at Project Runway, ultimately, and props to, the brands we worked with, we were able to donate like tens of, I hesitate to say hundreds of pounds of hair care, but we ended up donating a lot of that hair stuff to the Astoria Mutual Aid, and they distributed it to people in the community who like, it's one of those things where like, is it a necessity necessarily? Like, perhaps not, but is it something that's like an added expense that someone who might be financially struggling, like would maybe not take themselves? Yeah. And so that was really like something kind of great. And so I've been trying to sort of like continually like bring donations there. And they do have like drop-in moments where you can help. But yeah, they're all over the city. So if, whatever neighborhood you're in, just like neighborhood and mutual aid, they're really, really great about it. And it's like every once in a while you'll get like a text where they're like, hey, can you pick up milk for this person? And you're like, I can do it.
I think it's good for like people in this industry to like know more about where they can actually bring certain things and like promote that type of stuff, because
yeah,
we don't really hear about it too much.
The barrier for entry is high if you are already overworked and spending a lot of hours like trying to do your job without consideration for like, I'm trying to move like this from A to B. But yeah, so I don't know if I love that kind of stuff, and I did have the extra bandwidth in that moment. So I definitely
maybe if we'll send it to our graphics department, we'll put up a couple websites.
Yeah,
donate to. Yeah.
I love that.
If anybody wants to be the graphics department.
Yeah, well, I'll owe you a beer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Noelle, to wrap this up, any advice on life or the industry in general as a freelancer or costumer, or whatever advice you want to throw out there?
Just remember why you started, and definitely like just to circle back to what I was saying is like make sure that you're not missing your life for the job, if that makes any sense.
Tons of sense. I mean,
that's
something we all forget, because sometimes it gets to the point where this job becomes the life.
Which I mean, hell, don't mind, like I'm figuring it out still. And the thing is like the life is great, and I love like when you're in a big group, like a great group of people, it's like there's really nothing like a really good department that you're like, wow, I like going to work. But I also think, like life comes at you fast.
That's the thing about freelancing too, is like some shows are better than others. Some sets are better than others, and it's all temporary in a sense, where it's like you could work on something great and then work on something that you want to shoot yourself.
I think I thought that was a beautiful metaphor for life.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll end on your message because Tony got dark and
I got dark. Yeah.
I'd probably get dark too. So. Thanks for coming on, sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for letting me run my mouth. It was really, really fun.
No, it was good.
I'm gonna put your website up there and let people see your things. And I think it looks great, so be confident about that. Everything you've been doing is great.
Thanks, Tony. Oh my God, guys, thanks.
I'll see you in the hood. All right, later.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. Have a good day, guys. Nice chatting.